Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 162 for Thursday. February 1st, 2024. You know what that means, Mark? We only have 2 more months of winter left, or a month and a half if you're counting.
Well, with the crazy weather we're getting, summer could come tomorrow and then we could get winter back. Who knows?
Yep. Well, so we're calling this show Just the Facts, ma'am, show. Because we had two spectacular hit shows that we've published, number 160 and 161. Uh, don't believe the stats if you see them; they're not right. But really, really good feedback. Had a lot of people reaching out to us, right, Mark?
Hundreds and thousands of people too.
That's right.
But no, actually, we got some great feedback from folks that we know are avid Jancast.com listeners, and a lot of them were really pleased with the show where we had Steve Cooper from Bioplanet on, who is representing the science side of electrostatic sprayers. And he spoke about the science, and it was something that, I learned a lot from that. And I think a lot of people that tapped into that show were their comments to us, Scott, were that they learned a lot.
Yeah.
So it was a good program, and Steve was, was very gracious of him to be a VIP guest for us.
So those of you that didn't watch show number 160, we made kind of fun of electrostatic sprayers towards the end about the fact that they could be used for watering your plants and stuff, but nothing else. And Steve was nice enough to take offense to that and reached out to us to set us straight on the fact that, yes, he did confirm that most of the electrostatic sprayers that are out there don't work, right?
He did, and actually, the piece that grabbed a lot of traction from that show, which I think has started a domino effect, that it's not over, is that he talked about there needing to be a standard that electrostatic sprayers have to conform to, and he had talked about something called the Wood study, which was a study that was done on electrostatic sprayers. And the conclusion of that study was, out of like 6 different units they tested, almost none of them had a wraparound, and almost half of them had opposite charges. Some were positive and several were negative charge. So it's like, wait a minute, there's got to be a standard. And the other thing that Steve talked about is that some of the battery-powered portable units can actually degrade in their performance, in their ability to create the right micron size of droplet. So that's kind of where we learned from all that. And I bring up the Wood study, Scott, because that was part of what led us to say what we said in Jancast 160. That the studies that came out of academia were all pretty much talking about them as being toys and, great to water your plants with. But there was no wrap or anything like that. And Steve kind of did a great job, I thought, of explaining to our audience how they're supposed to work. And not all of them would fall into that category of being non-functional.
One of the things we talked about kind of off air that I don't think we actually brought up when we had Steve on was he had pointed out that if you use certain products through certain sprayers, not only didn't it work, it also had to be cleaned out. A special clean out procedure was required to even get it to work again, which is even worse because if you didn't know that, you'd think, oh, well, I just had to charge the battery up. Well, no, I think he said alcohol or something, didn't he?
Yeah, the other thing that came out of that, which I was amazed by, is the whole science thing, Scott. Kind of like the train left New York and then it left Chicago, and but what he said is that what happens as it degrades is that it seeks to find another ground, and that other ground could be the person wearing the backpack.
Oh, God. Okay.
And you experienced that.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a manufacturing defect, which it was probably a little bit of both. So get kind of continuing with the conversation about electrostatic sprayers, we dug up the research on, EPA has a protocol now established for adding the use of electrostatic sprayers to a existing product or a new product. And the interesting thing is there's nothing in there about making sure the units actually work. It's more about you've got to have a product. The first thing is it's got to be on the EPA N list, and then the product has to have within the direction use on the master label, has to have something about you can actually use it with a sprayer, like just a sprayer. So if you don't have the sprayer use on your existing label, you've got to amend your existing label to add the sprayer, and then after that, but um, nothing on establishing, well, what is a true electrostatic sprayer? You might have to have Steve back on for a follow-up, because it doesn't make any sense how EPA can establish a protocol for getting your product approved, but they don't approve maybe we're missing something, right? They don't approve the electrostatic sprayer. I don't know. It doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And I think it's all about making sure everybody's checks clear.
Oh yeah, you notice that $4,023 is the small business or the fee that you have to submit to be able to get considered for that particular.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so the whole, I mean, a lot of kind of interesting stuff. So along the same lines of what's real and what's not real, back in the pandemic days, even though we're not completely out of it, we made a big deal pointing out people that were making false claims about their products, right? And one of them was the airlines saying that their product was whatever the product was they're using on those airplanes in Texas only. And we can maybe I'll put a note in the show notes about what show to go back and listen to, because back then United and a couple others were claiming that they had 24-hour residual claims for disinfecting on their seats and stuff like that, which was complete bunk. So the EPA now has established protocol for gaining that, which I thought was pretty interesting. We had good chats with the people at the raw material, Steppen, Lonza, and Mason, those guys, and they asked us, well, would you be interested in a product that has a residual claim like that? And we said, absolutely, because whoever gets it first is going to have a monopoly on the market, because all the ones that claim it now are illegal, right? Or not
Right. Right.
proper. But it's a pretty thorough test, and you're my guru for like testing stuff. I put up on our show notes the chart about all the things it has to go through and the different log reductions. It's pretty thorough, isn't it, Mark?
Well, it is, but it may not be strict enough, Scott. Like one of the things it talks about is it effective or efficacious at the immediate application,
Right.
right? So that, to your point, it needs to already be approved by the EPA as a disinfectant, and they're really testing it for a duration of 24 hours.
Yeah.
And some of the claims that you and I have seen over the years ranged anywhere from 2 days to 3 years. And, that isn't even part of the testing protocol that the EPA has. So, in my mind, those claims still remain nefarious.
You had to think about that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I did.
Well, part of the testing, not only is it just you spray it on the surface and 24 hours later it's still killing. The part of the protocol involves durability assessments, which means there's the abrasion part there, because you're not just putting it like in real life. You spray your counter, it's like nobody's going to touch that counter. No,
Right.
so they've actually thought it through pretty well as far as the durability test. So it's above and beyond what a regular disinfectant is expected to do, because there's no durability testing on regular disinfectants, I don't think, is there?
No, but the interesting part is when you think about an abrasion test,
Yeah.
I guess what a lot of folks would immediately think of, well, they're grabbing 100 grit sandpaper and seeing if they can abrade it. Well, that's not the case. The abrasion that they're talking about is abrasion from using a wiping cloth, a traditional cloth wipe. So it's not like what you would expect, say, from foot traffic
Hmm.
on a floor, which would be foot traffic on a floor, especially soles of shoes carrying grit, can have the abrasive equivalent of 100 grit sandpaper.
Hmm.
So that's not the kind of abrasion that they're testing it for. They're testing it with a wipe down.
Hmm.
And some of the claims that I've seen is, it'll stand up to 100 wipes or swipes with a cloth, or one claim that was a 3-year claim was 40,000 wipes with a cloth.
Right.
But none of those are things I think that are at all relevant if somebody's engaged with applying a disinfectant to a floor area or a heavily used counter where there would be much more levels of abrasion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the protocol is probably established more for touch surface type claims, but it isn't specified there.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
so
it
it's
was,
pretty, yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, this was put out, I don't remember the exact date. And we'll put some links to the actual documentation for both the electrostatic spray claim as well as the residual claim. We'll put that in the show notes as well, but it doesn't look like it really gets into some of those other things. Yeah,
yeah, one of the notes that I people will see as they look over the chart is it's the testing for coatings and films, and you have to figure that that's what a long-term residual would fit into that category as a coating and film, more so than like a paint, which you'd find on the
yeah,
bottom of a boat, right? But their testing is for does it work for 1 to 2 hours? It's right on the chart. So okay, you're going to test it for 1 to 2 hours, and then does that mean you can make a 24-hour claim, a 24-day claim,
yeah.
a 3-year claim? So that I think is where more work needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to get an update from the powers that be as to how they're making progress, because when we initially discussed it with a couple of the master registration holders, they weren't sure whether or not they wanted to spend the money to go into it. And again, my comment was, whoever gets it first will probably be the person who spent the most money, but they'll also have something that is fairly unique. Not fairly unique, it will be unique and will actually have a legitimate claim. Unlike there's products out there that have the word or the number 24 in their name. I won't mention who, but those products don't have residual claims against anything we're worried about for 24. It's just great marketing. I wish I had thought of that.
Yeah, well, some of those are just aimed at odor-causing bacteria, not
Right.
disease-causing bacteria, but they're inferring bacteria as a kill so that
Yeah.
people feel safer, right? And
Yep.
it's really not about that. So, that's one of the things that they have to really ramp down into getting into these residual claims.
Yeah.
And then the other thing to think about, what I do know about this, Scott, is that most of the ones that I've seen are capitalizing on the idea that certain metals have some degree of toxicity to bacteria.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Things like copper and things like
Yep.
silver. But
Yep.
but because those are living organisms. So the bigger question in my mind is if they're using things like heavy metals or active metals like silver or copper, how is that supposed to be having an effect on something like a virus, which is not a living organism?
Yeah.
So how would you make a residual claim and say it's due to your metal content against a virus? It's not killing things, it's only inactivating viruses when you hit it with an active disinfectant. So those are things that seem very unclear to me. I know that um, I'm going to be involved with a webcast in April that's going to do a deeper dive on the different active agents that are being used in disinfectants and where this might lead to in the future, whether it be quaternary ammoniums or stabilized peroxides or bleaches or heavy metals or even colloidal silver and copper. Who
Yeah.
knows? But there's a doctor that's going to also be on that webcast, and I'll ask him because I don't know those answers.
Cool. Well, speaking of people with significant knowledge that we're not aware of, let's put the shout out there, because thanks to Stephen Cooper, we had a great show and there's a good follow up to it. But if any of you are experts in something out there, would like to be a guest on the show, reach out to us. You can find the email on the site where the Jancast is, or suggest some subjects for us to discuss. Mark and I have a good time kind of come up with what our various subjects are and guests we're going to have, but it'd always be nice to hear from those hundreds and thousands of people out there that are watching and listening to the show.
So, like we always say, Scott, we pride ourselves in not necessarily being the people with all the answers.
Yep.
We seek answers, but we do pride ourselves in asking the right questions.
Yep.
And so that's kind of what Jancast.com puts out there. These are questions that we get in the course of a day or a week, and we kind of put it out there for discussion so that everybody can benefit.
Yep.
So,
well, I hope everybody enjoyed this show. And if you haven't watched or listened to 160 and 161, get back there before you listen to 162 so you know what we're talking about. So thanks a lot for everybody joining in, and have a safe and I guess we'll be back before the Super Bowl, right? Yeah, or not. Well, if not, whatever. Whoever wins, wins at this point.
Somebody could download this a year from now and they'll say, we already know who won.
Yeah. Okay, well, everybody have a great great week, and next week, and we'll see you at the next episode of Jancast. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody.